Imagine it's 1987. You're 11 years old, standing in a cornfield maze in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. The air smells like dust and ripening stalks, and for a moment, you feel like the king of the world. But then, your baseball glove lying in the dirt, the one you know is sitting in your grandfather's truck. 10 feet away, his carving knife is stabbed straight into the ground. Then the light changes. Not like a sunset, more like someone clicking off switches, step by step. The paths start closing around you. And then you hear it, his voice, calling you back to the cabin. It sounds like your grandfather, but something is wrong. It's layered, like a dozen people all talking at once, trying to sound like one person. Out here in the Appalachian Mountains, there's an old rule: never answer a voice you can't see, because something in that corn is practicing. And it's almost got it right. Tonight we're telling Marcus's story, and the thing that's kept him out of West Virginia for 32 years. Stay until the end, because I'm revealing the biological red flag. The reason trained search dogs hit a mimic's trail and freeze, refusing to take another step. Deep in the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia, an 11-year-old boy walked into a cornfield maze and heard his grandfather's voice calling him home. What he saw at the end of that row when he turned around is genuinely one of the most terrifying things I have ever had to research. And to this day, nobody has an explanation. This happened in the late summer of 1987. Marcus was 11 years old. He is 43 now. He has never once gone back. The crack of the bat was still ringing in Marcus's ears when Walter appeared at the chain-link fence, 2 Cokes already open, held out like a peace offering the world hadn't asked for yet. Marcus's team had won. Bottom of the last inning, 2 outs, Marcus small for his age and standing at the plate with the red clay of the Little League field packed into the cleats his mom had bought him a size too big, so he'd grow into them. He grew into them that summer. He hit the ball so hard, it cleared the left field fence and landed in the gravel parking lot, and for about 4 seconds, Point Pleasant, West Virginia, was the greatest place on earth. Walter didn't whoop, didn't holler. He just nodded once, slow and certain, like he'd always known it was going to happen that way. That was Walter, 68 years old, built like a fence post that had been there so long the ground shaped itself around it. He drove a '79 Ford pickup the color of old pennies, and he never raised his voice because he never had to. They went to the movies. The Monster Squad was playing. Marcus had already seen it twice and didn't mention that. They got ice cream at the only parlor in town, and Walter told him to get the large without Marcus even asking. They drove the back roads home with the windows down, Walter's arm hanging out into the warm air, neither of them talking much. They didn't need to. Some people you have to fill the silence with. Walter wasn't one of them. The day felt complete, sealed, like something you'd want to keep. The gas station sat at the edge of town, last stop before the mountain road turned remote and the houses thinned out to nothing. Walter pulled in to fill the tank. Marcus climbed out to stretch his legs and drifted toward the front of the building, not going anywhere in particular. The man on the bench outside was old. Not old like Walter, old like the bench itself, like he'd been sitting there so long he'd become part of the geography. His hands rested on his knees. His eyes were fixed on the road ahead, watching something that wasn't there anymore, or maybe something that hadn't arrived yet. He didn't look at Marcus. Then he did. His hand came out and closed around Marcus's forearm. Not rough, patient, the grip of a man who was certain he was doing the right thing and didn't care how it looked. "Don't go outside after dark around here, boy." Walter was there in 4 steps, the grip released, Walter's hand landed on Marcus's shoulder and steered him back toward the truck. No words to the man, no backward glance, nothing. They pulled out onto the mountain road and the gas station disappeared behind a curve. Marcus asked what that was about. Walter was quiet long enough that Marcus figured he'd let it go. Ignore him. A pause. But some of that's true. He wouldn't say which part. Asked if Marcus was okay instead. Marcus said, "Yep." The truck climbed, the trees got taller. The sky got narrower, squeezed down to a strip of blue above the road. The radio signal died somewhere around mile marker 7, and Walter didn't bother turning it off. Static filled the cab all the way up the mountain. Marcus watched the trees and didn't think much about the old man's hand on his arm. Didn't think much about Walter's answer either. He would spend the next 32 years thinking about almost nothing else. Walter's cabin sat on 100 acres of remote West Virginia mountain land. Most people knew it one way, the cornfield maze. 2 acres of planted rows, cut through with shifting paths that Walter rented out to families on fall weekends for $5 a head. They'd wander around laughing, taking pictures, complaining their feet hurt. To those people it was a novelty. To Marcus it was a kingdom. He had a route memorized cold. Southeast corner entry, bear left at the first split, run the long straightaway, cut right at the Scarecrow post, out the North Gap. Under 4 minutes if he pushed it. Every turn burned into him like a map he'd memorized before breakfast. The afternoon light was doing that long golden thing it does in late August. Walter settled on the porch with his coffee. Marcus lasted 45 seconds sitting still before he asked if he could run the maze. Walter looked at the sky the way a man looks at something he actually knows how to read. Come back before dark. Marcus was already moving. He hit the southeast corner and bore left without thinking. His sneakers found the familiar packed dirt of the long straightaway, and he opened his stride, corn rising tall and dense on both sides. At the tops of the stalks a breeze moved through. He could hear it. But down at ground level the air was dead still. Halfway down the straightaway he stopped. Something lay in the dirt at the edge of the row. Not dropped, placed. His baseball glove. The one from the game that afternoon. His name in black marker on the inside cuff. The worn thumb patch from 3 seasons of use. The broken lace on the index finger he kept meaning to fix. He picked it up, turned it over. The corn on both sides stood perfectly still. His brain went straight to Walter. Had to be a joke. Walter did things like that. Small, quiet pranks. But Walter had been on the porch when Marcus left. Marcus had looked back and seen him standing there, coffee mug in hand, not moving. He tucked the glove under his arm and kept going. The Scarecrow post marked the bend where the straightaway ended and the path cut right toward the North Gap. Marcus used it like a landmark. Hit the post, cut right, 60 seconds to the exit. He slowed without meaning to when he saw it. One of Walter's carving knives stood upright in the dirt at the base of the post. Handle up, blade driven straight into the earth. The good knife. The one from the top kitchen shelf. The one Walter oiled twice a year and treated with the quiet respect of something he didn't want to lose. Long, thin blade. Never taken outside. Not once. Marcus did not touch it. He looked at the knife, then at the corn pressing in on both sides, then at the sky above the rows where the gold light was draining out faster than it should. Not a normal sunset fade, but something more deliberate. Like a dimmer switch turning down. The glove had been in the truck, the knife had been in the kitchen. Both of them were here now, placed at exact points along his route. One at the midpoint, one at the landmark. Like markers, like something that knew his path and had laid them out ahead of him on purpose. The ice cream in his stomach turned to something cold and heavy. Adult Marcus is quiet for a moment before he says the next part. If I had turned around right then, none of the rest of it would have happened. I've known that since I was 11 years old. A pause. I just didn't turn around. Marcus decided to exit north and loop back to the cabin the long way. Simple plan. He knew the north gap better than he knew his own bedroom, had hit it 100 times without thinking. He turned away from the knife and headed for it. The gap wasn't there. He counted rows the way he always did, paced the distance, hit the spot where the opening should have been, and ran straight into a solid wall of corn. Stalks packed tight, no gap, no thinning, nothing. He pushed at them anyway. They didn't give. He stood there for a second, certain he'd miscounted. He backed up and tried again. Same result. Fine. Secondary exit. Walter cut a maintenance access on the west side every season. A narrow gap, barely wide enough for a wheelbarrow, but it was there. Marcus knew exactly where it should be. He moved west and didn't find it. Not even close. Adult Marcus doesn't try to explain this part. He has spent 32 years not explaining it. He says only, the maze I had memorized was not the maze I was standing in. Not confused, not turned around. The paths were different. The maze had changed, or something had changed it, and he was 11 years old and alone inside 2 acres of corn, and the light was going. He started moving faster. The corn was taller than him. It closed overhead in places, filtering the last of the daylight into thin green-gray strips that landed on the dirt like something broken. His sneakers were loud on the packed earth. Everything else was completely silent. No crickets, no birds, nothing. Just his own footsteps and his own breathing and the corn. He stopped to get his bearings. That's when he heard it. Walter's voice. Somewhere to the right behind 2 rows of corn. Calm and unhurried the way Walter always sounded. Marcus, come on, supper's on. The words were right, the tone was almost right. Marcus took 1 step toward it. Something stopped him. Not a thought, not logic or bravery or anything he could put a name to. Something lower than all of that. A clench deep in the stomach that said no before his brain had finished processing the sound. The kind of signal the body sends when it knows something the mind is still catching up to. The voice came again. Closer now. Marcus, come on, supper's on. Same words, but the rhythm was off by half a beat. The way a song sounds slightly wrong when someone who doesn't speak the language tries to sing it phonetically. The words were correct. The weight behind them was missing. Marcus did not answer. He turned and moved in the opposite direction. The voice followed. It didn't rush. It kept the same distance behind him no matter how fast he moved, and it kept talking. Fragments of things Walter actually said, stitched together in slightly wrong order. The phrases were all real. The sequence was wrong. Like something working from a list, pulling words it had collected and not quite understanding how they connected to each other. Corn leaves slapped his forearms as he ran, opening thin paper cuts along his skin. Dirt clumped inside his sneakers. His breathing turned ragged and loud while the voice behind him stayed perfectly even. No effort, no breath, just sound. The light dropped in steps. Not gradually. In steps like someone was cutting it off in sections. His chest tightened. The air inside the maze felt thicker than it should, warm and close, like the inside of a closed room. And underneath the smell of soil and green corn, there was something else. Something without a name. Something that registered less as a smell and more as the absence of every smell that should have been there. He hit a dead end, spun, ran back the way he came. The voice was in front of him now. 2 voices, both Walter, both saying different things at the same time, both almost right. And with every sentence, each one was getting a little bit closer to perfect. Marcus ran until the maze stopped him. A wall of corn packed shoulder to shoulder, no gap, no give. He shoved at it with both hands. It pressed back silent and indifferent. His legs folded and he slid down until he was sitting in the dirt, back against the stalks, knees pulled to his chest. Both forearms stinging from a dozen thin cuts he didn't remember getting. The voices had multiplied. Not two anymore. A layered overlap of Walters coming from every direction at once. Left, right, behind. All slightly off, all talking simultaneously, the phrases bleeding into each other until they stopped being words. They became something that just had the shape of Walter's voice without any meaning inside it, like something that had listened long enough to copy the sound but never understood what the sound was for. Marcus pressed both palms flat over his ears. It didn't help. The sound came through anyway, or maybe it was already inside him, vibrating in his back teeth, behind his eyes, at the base of his throat. Then every voice stopped at once. Complete silence. The kind that isn't peaceful. The corn at the far end of the row moved, not wind, something pushing through deliberately, one step at a time. The stalks parted and a shape emerged and stopped at the edge of the path. Tall, still, familiar in a way that landed below conscious thought, somewhere animal and immediate. It stood the way Walter stood, that slight forward lean, hands loose at the sides, head tilted a few degrees left, the exact angle Walter used when he was listening to something he wanted to hear better. From 20 feet away, in the last of the gray light, it was assembled from everything Marcus knew about his grandfather. Every detail his brain had ever quietly filed away about that man was standing at the end of the row. Marcus could not move. The scream was there. He felt the shape of it in his chest, but it had no way out. He looked at its face, Walter's face, right structure, right proportions, the lines around the eyes, the jaw, all of it, but the details were approximate, like something had built it from memory rather than reality. Close enough to recognize, wrong enough to know. The eyes sat a fraction too far apart. The mouth was a fraction too wide. The skin had no variation, no weathering, none of the worn quality of a face that had spent 68 years in West Virginia sun and wind. It was assembled by something that had only ever watched Walter from a distance, through tree lines, through corn rows, through the long, dark spaces between. It took one step forward. The corn didn't move when it walked through it. A cold spike drove from the base of Marcus's spine, straight to the back of his skull. His fingers clawed into the dirt on both sides of him, without him deciding to do that. His lungs pulled air in shallow and fast, the kind of breathing that doesn't actually help. The shape tilted its head the other way, too far, past any angle a neck should reach. It held that position and regarded him from it, patient, still, like a bird looking at something small on the ground below. It took another step. A hand closed around Marcus's upper arm from behind. Rough, warm, real. The specific realness of cracked knuckles and calloused skin, and a grip that had spent 40 years working wood and fence posts and truck engines. It yanked him backward through the corn row so hard his sneaker half came off his foot. Walter, the real one. Jaw set, eyes forward, moving fast. They ran, corn slapping, boots on dirt. The porch light appeared between the stalks ahead, small and yellow and the most important thing Marcus had ever seen. And they hit the yard and the steps and the screen door, and Walter pushed him inside and turned, and stood at the door scanning the dark for 3 long seconds, before stepping in and pulling the latch shut. Marcus looked through the window. At the edge of the maze where the corn met the yard, the shape stood in the open, still, watching the porch light with the patience of something that does not experience time the way Marcus does. Not threatening, not retreating. The dark folded around it and it was gone. It hadn't chased them, hadn't needed to. It already knew where they were going. The kitchen was yellow and warm and smelled like the coffee Walter had made while he was out looking. 2 mugs sat on the table. Neither one steamed anymore. Walter sat across from Marcus and didn't ask what he saw. Marcus didn't ask why they weren't calling the police. There was an understanding in that kitchen. Some things don't get reported, don't get explained to people who haven't spent time on this mountain and don't know what lives here. Walter put his hand flat on the table, not reaching for Marcus, just there, an anchor. After a long silence, he said, "You didn't answer it when it called you." Not a question. Marcus shook his head. Walter nodded once, picked up his mug, drank the cold coffee like it was the most normal thing in the world. That was all he ever said about it. They left before sunrise. Here's what you need to understand about the Appalachian Mountains. The range is ancient. Older than the Himalayas, older than the Alps, older than almost any mountain system on Earth. These hills were old when the first people arrived and named them. And in all that unwitnessed time, all those centuries of dark hollows and black creek beds and ridgelines nobody mapped, things settled into the deep places that don't appear in any field guide or government database. People go missing here in ways that don't make sense. They vanish between one footstep and the next. Search dogs hit a scent trail, stop cold, and refuse to move, sitting down in the leaves, whining at nothing. Experienced hikers walk off marked trails and turn up days later miles away in terrain they couldn't have reached on foot. Some don't turn up at all. The old families who have lived here for generations know one rule above every other. It has been passed down so long nobody remembers who first said it. It doesn't need an explanation. You do not go outside after dark, not in these hills, not where the tree canopy closes overhead and the dark becomes something with weight and texture. Whatever lives in the black spaces between the ridgelines has been there longer than you have. It is more patient than you are. And it has learned, over a very long time, exactly how to sound like the people you love most. Marcus is 43 years old. He has never gone back. The old man at the gas station told him not to go outside after dark. Walter told him some of it was true. They were both right. The shape at the end of the row is still there. He knows it is. Standing at the edge of the corn, head tilted slightly left, patient as the mountains themselves, waiting for someone to answer. And some do. The ones who don't come home, the ones the search teams are still looking for, they answered something just like it. Which is why, when the search dogs hit that scent trail and sit down in the leaves and won't move another inch, you should understand what's happening. They realize they aren't tracking a human survivor. They're tracking an apex predator that has spent centuries turning the voices of the people we love into the ultimate mountain lure.